Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Sean Ferrari, and Brad Moody as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Sean, and Brad.
Hey, thank you for joining. This is the Cash News Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Moody, and today we've got a very famous guest that I thought was very relevant, Mr. Josh Cootware. Welcome, Josh.
Hello.
Hope all is well. And Josh, if you could just give us a couple minutes, tell us about what you do and what do you do day to day?
Well, thank you, Bradley. So my name is Josh Cootware. I work overseas supporting various government contracts with State Department, USA, DoD, and doing operations management and launching of new programs and also third-party monitoring as well. So that gives me a unique perspective of how to set up, one, branch entities overseas, and two, evaluating ongoing and active programs that other entities are implementing at the moment.
That's a lot of words, and that's actually great. Just in case anyone's curious, we're wearing our respective college teams, our alma maters, and we had a very good weekend. So it's we're both winners today. It doesn't always happen that way. So again, welcome to the Cash News Podcast. So a couple things I wanted to talk to Josh about is he's in some interesting places in the world, and not the places you typically go for on vacation, doing the good thing of setting up programs and helping out the communities. So Josh, one of the big things that we have that the podcast focuses on is, how is the frequency of cash used? How is it, how do we do it in the U.S. is one thing, but the one thing that we don't really know is, what happens in parts of the country or parts of the world that really is different in using of cash. So if you could just talk about some of the countries you've been to, and kind of like if you want to go to breakfast, buy a cup of coffee, or if you want to go buy a beer at the bar, if you want to go have dinner, like how does that work and transact as far as the actual physical usage of cash comparative to credit or other kind of means?
Yeah. So I've worked, Haiti, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Tunisia, Azerbaijan, Liberia, Nigeria, Malawi, a lot of countries around the world, Afghanistan,
Libya,
both East and West. And when it comes to money, that's important, especially in a place like Libya.
Yeah.
It's getting better recently for having a unified central bank, but it didn't always used to be that way. But so I have a lot of experience, but mostly from lower income to middle income countries. And honestly, cash is king in a lot of these places that we work. Azerbaijan is probably it's a middle income country on the way up that you can use certain cards over there, but everything needs to be backed, or at least have access to certain POS systems that they actually can reach. U.S. intermediary banks. The most common one is Citibank.
Oh yeah.
They work the most with, especially West African nations. That seems to be the predominant one. But anywhere else, it's cash. And it's really difficult because you also, to get cash, you can either go to the bank or to a formalized exchange, but you're going to get a lesser rate. So what happens is you can go to the street or the quote unquote black market and get a better exchange rate. And that's where you see a lot of the people engaging with to exchange US dollars into whatever the local currency.
So I really want to know, how does that work? So how do you find the black market, and then what's the financial benefit of using the black market comparative to an ATM or a financial institution?
Yeah, well, the financial benefit is it's consistent. They always have cash.
Good point.
The ATMs and the banks tend to run out. Like in a place, for example, in Nigeria, the black market is pretty apparent. You go in Abuja, for example, there's a Sheraton Hotel, and it's right in front of there. Everybody knows where these spots are. It's pretty upfront. You can go in there and exchange your rates, but it always has to be new notes and $100 bills. If there's even the slightest tear, or if it's not the new ones with the blue strip in it, you'll get a lesser rate. They'll still take it, but in 20s too. And so that's usually how it's done. When you go to Haiti, for example, they have different ways of exchanging cash as well. Haiti is interesting because it has 3 currencies. It has the Haitian gourd, it has the US dollar, and then it has the Haitian dollar. The Haitian dollar doesn't exist.
Right.
It's just this made up exchange rate to help normalize between the gourd and the Haitian dollar or the US dollar to give you some sort of collaboration or equilibrium on the exchange rate.
It's interesting. That's really interesting. So do you need to show up with US notes in order to perform that exchange?
I always travel with $100 bills, brand new. So I'll go to anyone here and exchange or take it out of my account and make sure that they're all new, crisp.
Interesting.
That's how I operate. Unless, again, Azerbaijan is one of the ones that operates the best. The hardest was Syria. The sanctions have not gone through. And you do have some Lebanese banks that are able to bring in cash, some Qatari banks, but they still operate off the Hawala network for a lot of their exchanges.
Yeah, and Josh has got a very unique perspective because he's the one that gets excited to go to work in Gaza, right? and he was just recently in Syria. Last week he was in Baghdad. So, it's to be able to see this and actually work in the markets, I think is an important segue. So, again, that's an interesting thing. So, and I know it's going to be hard to remember, but maybe Baghdad or maybe Syria is a better example. So if you wanted to go to eat a meal in Baghdad,
yeah,
how much was it if you convert it to U.S. currency?
Yeah, so it's, if you were to go out, you'd probably be looking at like a decent meal anywhere between 40 and 90,000 dinar. And that would equate to about $30 to $40.
So economies of scale.
Yeah,
it's a little high.
But if you want to go like to the where you see it the most is not necessarily in the restaurants, because you can find decent restaurants. It's when you go to the grocery stores.
Right.
So if you want to get granola or cereal or things like that, anything Western, you're going to pay for it in all of these countries because the import fees, the VAT or whatever on top of it, all that stuff is much more expensive.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So and that's all transacted in cash?
Cash, yes. Or you have to set up a local bank account if you want to get a card.
And do you find setting up bank accounts a little more restrictive than they are in the U.S. or a little more? Because I know you have to set it, because I know just from working together and talking together, when you go to a foreign country, you basically have to set up a new business in that country and hire attorneys and accountants and all that to funnel the money to pay people and to do the stuff and transact. So is that a difficult thing to open up bank accounts?
Yeah. 2 hardest things to do overseas, in my opinion, are buy SIM cards for your phone, and 2, set up bank accounts. The bank accounts are really difficult because you have to be tied to a contract or have some sort of residency visa that allows you to open up that bank account. As a company, you need to be registered as a branch or some sort of whatever entity you decide, and then from there you can set up accounts. Then they give you a card, or again, going back to like Liberia or Nigeria, they give you a token. So every now and then when you want to log on to your website to do some transaction to pay a bill, which I will say a lot of the countries, especially in Africa, have gone to that method of e-currency or transaction. It's all automated. It's on their phones and whatnot. They're skipping steps to go right to that, but they'll give you a literal token. You press a number, it gives you the validation. That's how you can log on. From there, you can get a card, and that's the best way to operate because a lot of these POS systems aren't tied back into whatever it is, like I said earlier, Citibank or a intermediary bank that you can as a holding account.
Right. That's interesting. So when you look at the value of currency, so what I have is I've got just a bunch of random notes, right? So one Azerbaijan dollar, well, what's their note called?
A manat.
The manat, right?
Yeah.
So one manat is 58 cents. So this is 50 cents.
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
Which is up. I mean, they've actually gone up a lot.
So this is interesting. This is when I was in Thailand. Thank you, Dave Slater. In Thailand, so this is what, 20 baht. It's 66 cents is the equivalent. So I remember that this is a very highly circulated note. And for 66 cents, you look at the security features and everything else that's in it. The one thing that's also interesting about the Thailand note is if you step on it in public, you go to jail because you have stepped on the Crown Prince. So I think that's an interesting feature. So this
fact.
This is an old note, Bank of Nigeria. So you were actually there, if I remember correctly. You were there when they did the conversion from the this is an old note to the new note, right?
Yeah, that was miserable.
So can you explain that? What happens in a country when there's a conversion of currency while you're there and you're trying to figure out how that goes? So this is 1,000 Nigerians. So this 1,000 is worth 67 cents current day. So as of right now. So just how does that work with being able to transact?
It's a nightmare because the banks are running out of cash. Nigeria does accept wire transfers, remittances from the U.S. Through any of those systems, and that ended up getting overloaded and closed down when I was there. Again, for the followers and watchers, I'm not a monetary expert. I can just talk
of course not.
about what it's like on the ground. I don't understand the full justification. It was leading up to the election. It was during that time period in Nigeria, and this was one way that they wanted to really come in and stifle inflation. And they've done this before, and it didn't work that time. And frankly, it didn't work again because they started issuing new notes into the economy, and there just wasn't enough. And people also didn't trust those notes because they were brand new.
Right.
And so they were using the old notes, or they were hoarding those notes, and it was so difficult. Luckily, we had, again, in Nigeria could do that, where you had the e-commerce, so we could pay bills over the internet and wire that to our vendors and so on. But the day-to-day things like buying fuel, getting just local stuff for our team, and the small things, that was the harder thing to purchase.
So interesting you say that about this. This is an interesting note, and I didn't look up the conversion rate, but it's a $2,000 Syria or 2,000 pound Syrian pound. Interesting enough in this is that we've been communications with your buddy. The problem with Syria is that's the former dictator.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal in Syria right now is, the conversion of the notes. But the problem is that when you start throwing in a new note, what happens to that is people think it's fake money, it's monopoly, and so it's really more of a marketing campaign. And it's a beautiful note. It's got all kinds of great security features, water features. But I guess the craziest thing is it still has the former dictator in there. So from your just experience, I guess it's more relative because you were just there in Syria, and this is the only currency they have now.
Yeah.
What do you think the behavior there of the constituency of Syria when they start getting these new notes in there and the common user that deals only in currency?
Yeah.
What are they going to think about when they don't know if this is real money?
Well, and the interesting thing is they actually still, even with all the sanctions, embargoes, and all that, U.S. dollars are everywhere in Syria. I was very surprised to see how much that was still going on, and for a long time. I paid my hotel in U.S. dollars. I paid a lot of the large transactions in U.S. dollars. But to get to your question, at the moment, it's such a heavy cash economy that it's going to take a lot of work for them to build confidence into that. And also to unify the banks, because some banks over there operate a little bit differently. Like I said, the Qatari banks in Syria have a bit more leeway versus the Hawala network, which the Islamic banks and things like that. It's not centralized at the moment.
Right.
Even though that's one of the largest buildings in Damascus is a central bank, but it's really difficult. Even the Lebanese banks are still bringing in cash over the border to pay things. So
yeah, I noticed that when I was in Pakistan. Right, it's what happens with this currency as it transacts. It was actually very interesting. I have no idea what country this is. Where's that?
I have no idea. I didn't give that to you, did I?
I don't know. I used to travel a lot, so I don't know where this actually is.
It looks Cambodian.
It looks like
Thai.
No, maybe? It's not Thai. Definitely not Thai.
Vietnam?
So it's probably it's Cambodian.
Okay.
So when you look at that's a beautiful note. All kinds of security features, and some guy with great glasses that likes to teach. 1,000 notes is probably worth 50 cents.
Can I ask you a question though?
Of course.
You see all these notes that have these really interesting features.
Yeah.
Versus something like that kind of does.
The dotted, yeah.
I just always surprised you see these countries with the lower to middle income paying for this sort of thing. How much does this cost to make?
A lot.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing with like good companies like Crayon and G&D and those, it's making a note that has a longer life cycle. So You want the frequency of that note to be able to transact. The problem is when you put it in a wallet, it folds, but it's still actually the polymer portion of it. Actually, it's pretty resilient because the U.S. note is still on linen, right?
Really?
The component is linen, so they actually hold up pretty long. So I love this one. This is when I was just in Hungary, right? The Hungary 20,000 Hungary notes. So 20,000. This is $60. So it's just like when you look at economies of scale. Yeah, I've got 20,000, and I don't have any Vietnamese money, but still, there's a lot of Vietnamese millionaires, but it's not worth a lot of money in currency. But it's a beautiful note within a lot of respective. The ink on it, it's fantastic.
Guy's mustache is really good.
It's fantastic. I can't grow that.
Yeah,
so
that's
good. I think it's interesting note. So this is one of the older Malawi notes, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So again, high security features, but I don't know why a country would want to change the note. 2,000 Malawi this is $1.16 as of today.
Yeah.
So, to spend the amount of money in security features for $1.16, I can't answer that question. So so Libya, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a $5 Libyan note. So in Libya, $5 is worth 93 cents. And again, the artwork that's in here is fantastic. So all the security features that's in it, it's a lot of money to spend on such a low value. And I've always said that it's funny because if you open up my house safe, I've got so much foreign currency that's out there. People are going to understand after I die, like, what did this guy do for a living? Because I've got probably 60, 70 countries worth of currency.
But it probably is valued at like $30.
Oh, if that. Yeah, if that. That's for sure. That's for sure. Except for the pound.
Yeah.
and the euro right now. So I just thought that was an interesting metric. So when you look at carrying the currency, obviously different sizes, everything else. So I guess the other questions that I'd like to hear, and this goes back probably to your military days of Josh is a distinguished veteran, and we appreciate that. The storage of value component of dollars and of foreign notes that are stored overseas. So can you tell us, you mentioned like, hey, you go in with $100 notes, right? Is that the standard, or what would happen if you were to go in there and with, I don't know, $60 in 20s? Would they be able to even transact that, or is it they don't think it's worth their while? Or have you seen any large storage of currencies? Because I can tell you some stories as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen large storage of currencies. They will exchange it. Let's be honest, but they'll give you some like response. Oh, it's a lesser exchange rate. That's all, and you have to haggle over that stuff. And it just kind of takes out all of the nonsense and going back and forth by just bringing in dollars. But the issue that you run into when you're setting up bank accounts more than anything is when you do international wires into it.
Sure.
That's the problem, because when you're trying to wire in those funds and you're trying to operate, because sometimes, I mean, you'll have hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in expenses, whether it's your rent, whether it's the vehicle leases, just the cleaning staff for operations, or the PMO, program management office, and things like that. It adds up quite extensively. And so you need to keep these funds going. And then you get to a certain point, but you always have to kind of go along on a razor's edge.
Sure.
Because when you want to get that money back out. So the Forex problem, like Malawi, one of those last currencies you showed, I ended up having to fly out to Lilongwe to go to the bank to say, listen, we only had a few $100,000 for a multi-million-dollar program to get back out. And it took an act of Malawi and Congress to get them to release those funds because of how tight Forex is. Now, with that said, you don't see large tranches of cash anymore, bags of cash like they used to. You always hear the stories in Afghanistan of just bags and pallets of cash being shipped in, which I have seen, and it's true. But nowadays, more of that stuff is done by wire transfer where it can be.
Right.
But places like, again, going back to Syria, which is still under sanction, you're not seeing that nearly as much. You're seeing it moved in. The wire transfers, I should say. The cash is still going in.
Right.
So it's whoever has access to the global economy, whoever has access to SWIFT, to those intermediary banks, because a lot of the U.S. banks won't operate with those.
So that's why you're setting up bank accounts before you even get there, so you're able to transact that wire and figure it out when you get there, right?
The hardest part of working overseas is how do you pay for things.
Yeah.
It takes forever and it's messy. Again, going into like Liberia, if I were to go and exchange $100, I'd walk back with just a brick
Yeah, right.
of cash, and it's not reasonable. And like 2 bricks, 3 bricks, 4 bricks pays for dinner.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a pain in the butt. I remember we were running from one of my companies I used to work for in Benghazi. We were running third-party monitoring and doing assessments out there, and just making weekly payroll. We all came in with cash.
That's a good point.
And then to go out there to get, we paid in local currency. We negotiated their rates in local currency, and we had an agreement once a week at Friday or Thursday, whatever the end of the day work week was. We would make those payments, and you're just walking along with a bag full of cash in the middle of the street, and at any moment
How many, so obviously security and risk, is my background. So was it pretty evident when you see a guy that doesn't look like everybody else and they're carrying a duffel bag?
Yeah.
Right. Did you ever have a security issue? Like you're like worried about it? Or, because I know that you've had armored car and all kinds of stuff, like move stuff around for you. And
yeah.
Like, is that, how many others are doing it, I guess is the riddle.
It depends on where you are, but a lot are.
Yeah.
And it's really, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's not a matter of having a weapon at your side to do it. It's better to just know the system, know somebody who knows, has a good phone number to call in case there's a problem to walk down the road, and to have a security team who understands what's happening. Anybody who walks in just like, oh yeah, I'm strapped and ready to go, like that, you're not doing right by your local partners by doing that. And you're also going to put yourself more at risk than anything else.
Yeah, right.
Understanding local context, making sure you do your due diligence before you get out there. That's how you're successful. But I have had times where it's just like, it gets a little dicey, but not because of the cash. Because honestly, what I have on cash is a lot less valuable than what I represent at the greater, part of the program. And that's when corruption comes in. There's been many a times I've been sitting in meetings where folks are like, they're angling for something larger. Yeah.
I had that happen in the Czech Republic, doing an investigation. They're like, I was like, oh, I need to talk to the police department. And the first thing they asked me was, how much cash do you have?
Yeah.
And I was like, why would I need cash? And like, you have to have that. It's part of the process.
Exactly. Yeah. Even because every step of the way is a bureaucracy and an opportunity to extract something, because you need something from that local partner.
In cash.
Right.
The most anonymous form of payment, right? That's out there. So
yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to kind of chat about, or like any great story? Do you have a great story that's out there about the cash? And I mean, I could talk all day, but people get bored about handing a bag of cash.
The podcast is to talk about money. So yeah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, I've done some crazy stuff, that's for sure. So in a good way.
All right, what's your crazy story? I'll put you on the spot as the host.
Handing someone a bag of cash, just for the ability to find somebody that I could talk to about a fraud event.
Really?
Yeah, that was actually pretty interesting. Like, and not speaking a language, like hearing people argue back and forth, and I'm just sitting there like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm like, I just hope I don't get shot today, right, at that point. And I'm like, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, shake hands. And you're like, all right, cool. You go through and you're like, I don't know, is this a bad thing, or do I have to pay somebody else?
Yeah.
So that's mine. I look back at it and I was stupid and young.
Yeah.
That's mine.
But, no, I mean, because I worked on U.S. government contracts quite a bit. There's a lot of regulations, and you gotta follow those, because we follow U.S. laws. And the tricky part is, how do you thread the needle with local expectations versus FAR regulations here in the U.S. with not getting caught up into some sort of corruption scandal? It's super difficult. And there's times, like, I would say working in the continent of Africa is probably one of the more difficult places to work. In terms of, just because there is so much bureaucracy, and there's always, and even in the Middle East, like, they just love their stamps. And to get that stamp, you got to pay some sort of fee, but they'll give you a receipt for it. And so it's not necessarily corruption if there's a receipt. But the hardest part is like just making sure that you're staying within your regulations and doing right by the contract, but also trying to navigate. If you can thread that needle, then you can be a fairly successful operator overseas.
Yeah, well, it's an important feature. So, hey, I appreciate your time. All is good. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. And again, Josh has done some really cool stuff. So please, subscribe and like. And if you have any questions, please make comments, and we'll get back to those. But again, our purpose here is to kind of elevate the purpose of cash and how the cash is used in the environment. And the U.S. is a pretty big country. It's not the biggest, but it's important to understand that others rely on the usage of cash and how that works in the environment. So Josh, hey, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I appreciate Georgia Tech beating Duke coming up here in the next couple weeks.
Go Duke.
Yep. I appreciate everybody, and hey, have a fantastic week, and I appreciate everybody's viewing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.